Welcome to Orchid's November webinar. My name is Natalie, and today Anne and I will go through configuring Orchid Notes for Sage 300 in less than 30 minutes. Notes let you attach context-sensitive notes to Sage 300 screens. It helps improve collaboration through better information sharing. Instead of having post-it notes everywhere on your desk, you can have all this information held inside Sage 300 and readily at hand to improve customer service and support on-the-job training, as you can attach procedural notes and data entry guidelines to Sage 300 screens. As such, it also supports remote working and multi-site operations. Orchid Notes has a highly flexible configuration. You can attach notes to any Sage 300 screen, and that's core modules as well as third-party modules developed in the SDK, such as Orchid EFT or RMA that we will look at today, and norming fixed assets or Perisoft Cashbook. You can link to any data up to 2 fields. So you can have vendor notes, you can also have item notes, and you can have specific item notes for specific vendors. Notes can include rich text, formatted text, hyperlinks, and even small images. And you control who can see what by configuring role-based rules for those notes. So in this presentation, we will configure different types of notes in 4 scenarios on master file, transactions, and procedural notes to demonstrate the flexible configuration options and the breadth of the Orchid Notes module. We will start with some master file notes on customer and customer inquiry in accounts receivable. We will then show how to display these notes when entering orders in order entry, and also how to create customer and item notes on a combination of those 2 master files in OE. Moving on to the GL and transaction notes, we'll see how we can attach notes to GL journal batch so that you can see the note both from the GL batch listing as well as when entering the journal. And finally, we will look at procedural notes, where you can add a note to the screen, and we'll do that with GL account, creating the EFT file and an RMA entry. So in this presentation, we've given ourselves 25 minutes to download Information Manager, activate notes, and configure it across those 4 scenarios. As we are running 3 separate sessions for this webinar, we will play a pre-recorded video for this part, and the time starts now, or I should say in the next few seconds when we start the video. And there may be a short gap until the video starts. So we'll see you back here in 25 minutes.
Initially, we're going to download Information Manager. Notes is part of Information Manager, so we'll install Information Manager and then make sure our license code includes notes. And then we'll configure notes. We'll set up some note types, roles, and assign users to the roles, and in the options we'll configure which screens are going to show which notes. Once you have logged in on Orchid systems, you can go to the product downloads, select the version you want, and then download Information Manager. And once downloaded, we can install the program. You need to fill in your serial number, and the NFR serial numbers are on the website. And if you have the activation code, you can fill it in now or fill it in on the license screen later. and then log into the Sage 300 company that you want to activate notes in. In Admin Services, you activate Information Manager. And go to your license file to see that you have notes active. In this case, I'm on the 30-day trial, but if I key in my activation code, I will see what components of Information Manager I'm licensed to run. And in this case, it's licensed for Notes as well as the other submodules of Information Manager. Notes don't have a user count. These users here are for Document Management Link. And these are the setup icons we're going to use for notes: note types, roles, user roles, as well as the options. In the options, we need to make sure that the notes tray icon starts automatically or configure user by user. In our case, we're going to start the tray icon automatically for all users as they log in Sage 300. And this means that this tray icon will start automatically when a person first logs into Sage 300. And we typically drag and drop that into your tray here so you can see that it's active. Notes can have categories or colors, and it's an easy way to identify your notes. In these examples, I'm going to have some item notes, which are going to be light blue, some customer notes, which are going to be yellow, some GL notes, which are going to be green, and some procedural notes, which are going to be a light lilac. The first scenario we're going to look at are AR customer notes. We're going to configure customer notes to be shown on the AR customer screen, and it's going to be viewable and editable by the accounts role. And we're also going to have the same notes shown on the customer activity, also viewable and editable by the accounts role. The first configuration we're going to do is around the AR customer screen. When we have a look at the screen and we use our tray icon by clicking on the options, we can put the tray icon beside our customer screen and then see the screen is called the AR1300, and the field that we want to configure around is the customer number. So we'll take note of these two for our configuration. In Information Manager Setup, we first need to set up a note type. So this is going to be our customer note. And you can have multiple notes. So each time somebody records a note, we have a new note, date and time, who created it, or you may wish to just maintain one note. And here we select our default category. So these are going to be our customer notes. And we need our accounts role. And accounts can add, view, edit, and delete the customer notes. Let's also create a sales role. And perhaps they can only view the customer notes. And then we need to assign our users to the roles. So Natalie is going to be in accounts, and Anne is going to be in sales. And I'm also going to add admin to the accounts role for testing purposes. And then in the options, we configure the row for the customer note around the AR1300 customer screen. So we want to restrict this note to the AR1300. If I don't fill in the roto ID, it will show on all screens where we see the customer number, including finders. We want to display a note around AR1300 and the field was customer number. The note type was our customer note. We want to display all notes. We don't want the tray icon to flash. We just want to show the note in the alert box and call it customer notes. When you make changes to the notes while you're logged into Sage 300, you need to refresh your tray icon or close the company and reopen the company. To test this setup, if we go to AR Customers, our AR1300, we see we have the notes icon indicating notes are configured, but there are no notes yet. When there are notes, this yellow box will have purple squiggly lines. And if we look at a customer, when we click on the notes icon, we can see that we can create a new note. And I can add a note. If we look at this next customer, we could add another note, or going back to 1100, now that we have a note, we see it straight away, and it has the customer color. If we now want to see the same note on our customer inquiry, we need to take note of the roto ID and the field label. So the field label on the AR customer inquiry is customer no full stop, and the roto ID is AR 1700. So in our information manager setup, we can duplicate this row but set it up for AR 1700. And on the Details tab, we can see the individual columns. And again, if we've done any changes to the setup while we're logged into our session, we need to refresh our tray icon. And now when we go to the AR customer inquiry, we see the same note. And because I'm part of the administrator group, which is part of accounts, I can edit the note. Somebody in the sales group would only be able to view the note. The next scenario we're going to look at is how to display these same customer notes, CustNote, against the OE sales order entry screen and have the same access rights. Sales can view only and accounts have all access rights. And then we're going to add another note to this OE sales order entry screen. And this note is going to be a combination of the customer number and item number. So an item specific note per customer. And the sales and accounts role will have all access rights to edit, view, modify and delete these notes. In the OE order entry screen, we note that the field label for the customer number is also customer NO full stop, and that the roto ID for the OE order entry screen is OE1100. In the Information Manager setup, on the Notes and DML Extender tray, we see we've already got a configuration for the Customer NO full stop label, but it's restricted to the AR 1700 screen. If we remove this label, it will apply to all screens which have the customer NO full stop label. After doing the configuration change, we refresh our tray icon and relaunching the OE order entry screen. When we key the customer number, we see the same note. So we're now going to configure a new note type for the customer and item combination. So the customer field label is customer NO full stop, and the item number field label is item no full stop / MISC full stop charge. Unfortunately, the options can't show us the grid labels, so we just need to take note and copy them accordingly. For this new configuration, we need a note type, cust item note, we're going to allow multiple, and we're going to assign the category item. And then we need to assign this new note type to our roles. So accounts are going to add, view, edit, and delete the customer item notes, as are people in the sales role. And previously we had assigned users to roles. Having created the note type, we now go and configure the note type in our options. For the order entry screen, and now we should consider the display order. The customer note has a display order of 0, so if we want to show the customer notes first, we need to make the display order of the item notes 1, or we could have done it the other way around. And looking at the details, this is a case where the second field value is the item number. So we're going to display a note, and the note we're going to display is the customer item note, and it's linked to the customer NO field and the item NO / MISC charge field. We're going to display all notes, not worry about the tray icon, show the alert, and call it customer item notes. Save our options. Refresh our tray icon, and back in the order entry screen, if we call up an existing order, clicking on the notes, we can add a new note, and this time we've got 2 types of notes. So let's add one for customer 1200. And we'll add one for the customer and item combination. And we notice that the first item is active at this stage. And giving our notes an opportunity to refresh, we see the customer note, and then we see the customer item note. The customer item note is blue, the customer note is yellow. And if we select the next item, we go and add a new note. This time it's for the A11050. The next scenario we're going to consider is attaching the same note against a GL batch, both on the batch listing screen and on the GL journal entry. And the note type is going to be GL batch note. We will first create the note type. We're not going to allow multiple because we're just going to have one note per batch, and assign it the category GL notes. And in the roles, accounts can add, view, edit and delete. And we're not going to assign any access to this particular note for the sales role. And in General Ledger, we make a note that the GL batch list is GL 2000 and batch number is the field label, both on the header and the grid. We want to fire from the grid. And the GL journal entry is GL 2100 and the batch number label is also batch number. In IAM options, we're going to do 2 configuration rows. For GL 2000, the batch listing, and in this case we're going to go batch number prefixed by G to say it's the field from the grid. The note type is GL batch note. We're going to show it in the alert. And the same for GL journal. Refresh our tray icon. And on the GL batch list, we now have our configured icon. And if we add a note for batch 206, and when we open up batch 206, we now see the new batch note. And when we go to edit it, because there's only one, it straight away opens up the edit box. And instead of dragging your note box, you can pin and unpin your note to the original source screen. You would unpin if you had 2 physical screens and you wanted to put your note on the second screen. Notes can contain hyperlinks to websites, to documents, and rich formatted text, or even pictures. So I could copy and paste this hyperlink into my note. And double-clicking on the hyperlink would open up the associated document. And the final type of notes we're going to create are procedural notes. These are notes that you can attach to any screen. We're going to create a note type called instructions, assign it to the instructions category, and assign our role for accounts to add, view, modify and delete. And the main difference between procedural notes and normal notes is the field label we use is a special name in curly brackets roto ID, which is the screen ID. And once you've created it once, it can apply to all screens. We're then going to go and create some notes and attach it to our GL accounts, create EFT screen, and our RMA, Return Material Authorization Entry screen. First, we're going to create a note type for our instructions. We're just going to allow a single note and associate it with our procedural category. And assign Add View, Modify and Delete to accounts. And then in our setup, so this note is not going to be associated with any specific roto ID or any field label. But if we use the special field label of roto ID in curly brackets, then it will be applicable to any screen that we want to add notes to. We're not going to change the tray icon. And we're going to label it instructions. Refresh. And then we can go and attach notes to the required screens. So in our GL accounts, we can add a note. So remember to select the correct account group. And we've got our applicable note. We also wanted to add it to EFT processing. Create EFT file. You can add notes, both procedural and normal notes, to any third-party SDK program that's created in the SDK. So we're just using EFT in this case as an example. So assuming we're doing both local and international payments from the same bank, and we need to overwrite the bank file type when we're doing international payments. And also we could have notes for RMA authorization entry. Again, a third-party SDK created module. Assuming you're using RMA templates and you want to encourage the data entry to choose the correct templates.
Thanks you, Anne, for this presentation on configuring Orchid Notes. So in 25 minutes, we've now taken information sharing to the next level. We've removed all these little post-it notes and incorporated them in Sage 300. And we've done that across master files, customer and customer inquiries. In order entry, we've shown customer notes as well as customer item notes. We've shown GL journal batch notes that we can see when we're entering the batch as well as on the batch listing. And we've entered some procedural notes around various screens, including third-party modules. It's a coincidence that only the procedural notes have been entered against third-party modules. You can attach notes to EFT files, for example, EFT vendors, or to RMA transactions against a particular field, not just the procedural notes. So in this in these scenarios, we've configured these various types of notes with different roles. We haven't logged in as the different users in the different roles, but obviously, if you're doing real implementation, you would then test out these various user setup to make sure that the users see only what they need and only have rights to update what they're allowed to update. So to achieve this this configuration, and actually while we are on this, we'll answer one of the question. Is there a sample data in Sage 300 ready to use this module? So yes, the Orchid sample data in the Orc LTD database notes is configured, and we have in there a few of the notes that we've shown here, like we have some customer notes as well as some customer and item notes combination. But we're looking at ways and making these particular note configuration from this webinar available as well, because it's a different range of options. Actually, in Orc LTD, there are also a few procedural notes configured. So to achieve this configuration, we have used a few icons on the Information Manager setup screen, which are summarized in the visual process flow. So a reminder that to view the visual process flow, you need to assign it to the various users, including the admin user in Sage Administrative Services. So we set up the note category, which defines the background color for the note. Then we create a note type for each key records that the notes are going to be attached to. And then we link the roles to the note types and assign users to roles. Once a user is assigned to a role, you don't need to change that until the requirements change. However, every time you create a new note type, you need to link it to the role. So that is a pretty common support question. You have had notes running for a while. Suddenly you create a new note type, and sometimes you forget to add that note type to the role. And that even applies to admin. And then in IM options on the hotkey setup tab, you configure which screens and which field labels will trigger these notes. And as usual, when you use the tray, you need to refresh it or restart the Sage 300 desktop for the new configuration to take place. In this presentation, we've seen how to enter notes directly on the screen when you're in the screens that the notes are configured in, but you can also import notes and view them when you're logged into Sage 300. So Orchid Notes is a very cost-effective way to improve collaboration among Sage 300 users. And for example, we use it internally to keep track of some partner-specific requests related to renewals that we process through order entry. And now, while it's beyond the scope of today's presentation, notes can also be used in conjunction with other Orchid modules for an even wider range of options. If you're using optional tables, you can configure more structured notes for Sage 300, and again, they apply to master files, transactions, and third-party products. You can also use notes in conjunction with Extended Developer to create conditional notes and on-the-fly notes. So if you want the notes to apply only for certain customers, you can use an extended script that is run only where certain conditions are met. And when you do on-the-fly notes, the content of the notes will be built as you're going to the particular screen. So you don't have to enter a note or import it. And in our Orchid sample data, there are examples of that around in order entry. When you enter an order, you can view the year-to-date sales for this customer. And when you're on a line, you can view the year-to-date sales for this particular item and customer combination. Other examples include real-time stock availability. When you're using these extended script in a note, You can also, you have access to additional functionalities such as the ability to have a list of orders with a drill down back to the order entry screen. And again, in our Orc LTD database in the Orchid sample data, if you look at the OE shipment screen, you will see a note that lists all the orders on back order for that customer with the ability to drill down. There's also a note that actually runs the customer aging. And the limit there is really your imagination. So there are other examples of that on the website in the extended notes blog article. And you can also use it for linking to external or cloud-based application, for example, to get current exchange rates or freight charges. Thank you for your time. So for more information, you can look at the notes page on the Orchid website, as well as search for notes-related information on the new search functionality that's on the top right of the website, if you haven't come across that yet.